It's that time again, where I've scoured the internet to showcase some of the best or most interesting animations that I could find. I've done this twice before, and it's been fun, both times. I really enjoy making a series like this. But you might be wondering, if I enjoyed this particular miniseries so much, why did it take me so long to make a third installment? Well, one point of Admirable Animations is that the series is more than just finding something great and saying that it's great. I don't like to be redundant. Like, I think that Beauty and the Beast is a really great movie, but me saying that, it's kind of pointless. It's what most people seem to think. I like finding those things that people have overlooked, or the things that people didn't really give a good enough chance. A large part of the series of Admirable Animations is helping certain things get more attention. And so for this miniseries, I wanted to state a rule that the animation in question I found couldn't have more than 1 million views. After about 3 years of not finding enough material with that criteria, I said fuck it, let's just make the third installment anyway, ignoring that criteria. After all, on the internet, everything can be considered lost in the shuffle. The only rule here is that I like these animations enough to recommend them. And as always, links are in the description if you want to see them for yourself. And I highly recommend it. Let's start with the animation suggested the most in the previous 2 installments.
Hey, hot stuff. You see something you like?
I think I lost my appetite. Why are you still here?
I think the more appropriate question is, why are you still here?
Because you suck at your job?
I suck at my job? I suck at my job? Jonathan, do you really think I suck at my job?
Welcome to Hell. This animation follows a character named Sock, who kinda murdered his parents in his sleep. Then he kills himself and ends up in hell. It ends up pretty cool though.
Where's all the brimstone and fire? Why am I not being tortured as we speak, suffering for all eternity?
Oh, don't sound so desperate, kid. See, I'm currently in the process of having hell renovated.
The devil,
Mephistopheles.
whatever, is impressed with Sock's penchant for murder and hires him to haunt and torment some random guy until he ends up killing himself. If I could describe it, it's kind of like a more messed up version of Looney Tunes. The short likes to play very, very serious and dark things in a low-key manner, which is a style that I really do like. It's similar to Voltaire, where it does go on about some of the darkest things ever, like, say, eternal damnation and murder, with a coy playfulness. If you like Billy and Mandy, you'll probably like this. It's a lot more adult, though. A lot of the comedy in this comes from the dialogue, which is definitely a showcase of playing to your strengths.
What you listening to?
The Holla Soundbox?
Never heard of them.
Seriously? You're unbelievable.
As you might have noticed, the animation is a little bit rough, but it is leagues better than your typical internet animation, where instead of writing jokes, the animators just try and give their characters the grossest facial expressions possible. Unfortunately, like with most comedies, me talking about what makes it great, any of the particular jokes, would probably ruin the experience. So I'd recommend just going in as blind as possible.
Sam, the closet light isn't working again. Sam? Ah. Always the same. Darling, I've got everything under control. Yeah, right. You dummy. Sam, there's so much to do.
Remember a really, really long time ago? Like, back in 2014, a long time ago? I reviewed a series of drop pilots released by Disney in a series called Shorty McShort Shorts. A lot of the shorts I found had really good concepts, but a very bad execution. Although, I found that there were a few bad concepts in there, like a school for grocery mascots. One of these shorts that I thought had a bad concept was called My Mom Married a Yeti. It was about the domestic life of a family where the husband was a literal monster. I really did think that you couldn't make that good or interesting. And yet, the concept of this one is a little bit self-explanatory. And it does this concept very well. Although the thing most of note here is that it looks really good. Like, this is some of the best internet animation that I've ever seen. And of course, the background is highly detailed. A thing of note, this one is actually by a full-on studio. I'm a Monster is a teaser for a full-on project by independent animation studio Headless Productions, which, as far as I know, hasn't come out in full yet. And that, unfortunately, is another one of these reasons why I like to hold off on these internet animations web videos. In the last one, I recommended a Newgrounds parody animation of Silent Hill 2, which ended in a to-be-continued like 10 years ago, and which was apparently stated by the creator that it's never going to be updated. I'd be mad, but that's 90% of the internet. Interesting stories ended by to-be-continued. and then never ever continued. Look, there's a reason why cliffhangers are one of my biggest media pet peeves ever. If you're making something, unless the future installments are already completed, don't end what you did in to be continued. It almost never works out anymore. It's been 7 years since this teaser has been made, but for this one, I still do hold out hope that it's going to come into fruition, because Headless Productions is still around today and is still doing stuff. Most notably, they've done the character design for Netflix's Troll Hunters, which is apparently a series I need to look into. Also, one more thing. You might see this short floating around on YouTube. The actual original upload is on Vimeo, and that's the one that I'm linking to, which sadly has less views than the YouTube re-upload. If you do come across re-uploads on the internet, please try to find the original video and give them the view. Sometimes that's not always easy, I understand that, but it is worth the effort. These people deserve the views on their original uploads. Just saying outright, this one has a photosensitive epilepsy warning. Since YouTube killed annotations, I can't directly link you to the time when I go to the next one, but I will leave the time that I do so in the corner so you could skip ahead manually. Sorry, YouTube just thought that wasn't a very good feature to keep around. This one is called Kaizo Trap. It starts when a man arrives home from work and his girlfriend gives him a game console that is in no way related to the Nintendo Entertainment System. Actually, it's very related to the NES, down to having an NES story. The man gets sucked into the game console and his girlfriend has to save him by going through 8 worlds of hell. And I kinda mean hell literally. It's called Kaizo Trap for a reason. There's not much to talk about in terms of content, it's mostly style. The girlfriend goes through quite a lot to rescue her boyfriend, and some very high energy animation, all punctuated to some very nice music. I cannot imagine the dedication needed to make something like this. So much is on the screen at once, and it's filled with tons of tension. And when you finally make it to the end, you realize that you got the bad ending. Yeah, if you, the viewer, want the good ending, you actually have to find it. That's a really creative use of YouTube annotations. Unfortunately, I myself could never figure out how to get the good ending. Maybe you'll have more luck than I did. I think I mentioned Little Quentin a while ago. I love this short, but telling you why exactly would kind of spoil things. I guess I'll start by trying to say what I can without spoilers. First of all, look at this animation. And I'm not talking about just the quality of the drawings and the expressions, which are done very good. I'm talking about the atmosphere. The coloring. By Quentin in the title, they mean Quentin Tarantino, and look at how far they go to encapsulate his style. If you're not into the darkly dramatic stuff, don't worry, this video is actually a comedy video. As you might have guessed by the gruff-looking detective guy picking up a bunny rabbit and then a sad clown. It's kind of a parody in the same vein of Young Frankenstein, where the creators went far out of their way to replicate the target of their parody as accurately as possible. And it's an experience that probably won't be recaptured for quite some time. Alright, now for some spoiler talk. I'd advise you to take a break here and just watch the animation yourself. It's only 10 minutes long. If not, the time is up in the corner, skip to that if you want to avoid any spoilers. In 3, 2, 1. So the twist is that this is actually a game in the mind of a little boy. I guess, Little Quentin. The punchline is the fact that a little boy is telling the story of 3 guys all reacting when one of them kills a stripper in an outrage, with a lot of smoking and booze along the way. And it's actually a very funny twist. And the ending is probably the best thing. It's the funniest thing in the entire short because it's the most disturbing thing in the short. Like, throughout the entire story, they're talking about this gritty narrative about murder, and the most disturbing thing in the entire short is a little girl's tea party. What makes this one special, though, to me personally, is how much it makes you think about what Quentin Tarantino was like as a kid, or really how any of the famous directors that make very dark, gritty, or gory products were as kids. especially nowadays when kids are getting suspended for biting sandwiches into the shapes of guns. I mean, plenty of kids have very dark and disturbing fantasies. And it's not like they don't know about things like booze, drugs, or whatever. Some of our most famous writers and directors creating things like horror, they probably weren't spending their childhoods writing stories about ponies and marshmallows. That's all I'm saying. I don't think that this short film is trying to lampoon this kind of attitude, like, at all. It's just my projection onto the story. You know, that if a child comes up with a story involving blood and gore that they're disturbed or whatever. But it oddly feels more and more relevant as time goes on. Like, that is a hallmark of very good media. It becomes more relevant the further we go on. Like, when it comes to dealing with children's fantasies, just because a child's fantasy is disturbing doesn't mean that the child themselves is disturbed, which is something that I do think that we are forgetting as time goes on. But let's go on to something more innocent if this isn't really your style. Out of Sight is an animation about a little blind girl. It is one of the cutest videos that I have seen in some time. This girl bumps into someone on her way home, and so her seeing eye dog gets enraged and starts chasing him down. Unfortunately, this leaves the little girl on her own, and while little Quentin made something innocent a bit more adult and scary, this one does the inverse. A blind child getting lost on the way home is a frightening idea, but the animation does something interesting. She goes under a gate, trying to find her dog, and we see her perceptions, as in, the perceptions of a little girl who is forced to imagine the world around her, and it really is a trip. The things that they do with the visuals are amazing, and it's something you could only do with animation. Things pop into existence, morph, and change as the girl realizes what they are, even if the guesses aren't always accurate to reality. It's cute and heartwarming. And finally, Film Quest. So, tell me if you heard this one before. You got this bright-eyed young director who wants to make a major motion picture and will do anything to make it happen. Okay, now imagine that story happening in a Mad Max-inspired post-apocalypse. This is the premise behind Film Quest, or at least the pilot for it. At one episode, it's already a contender for one of the great funny web series. Like most comedies, it is really hard for me to tell you why it's so great without spoiling what makes it so great. But a lot of this comes down to the premise. On the surface, it's a skewed priorities joke. Instead of trying to survive, our main character's biggest goal is to make a movie. But this is a little bit more powerful than your average everyday comedy. The main character's struggle is very relatable. Even in a normal world, making art is hard, and it requires overcoming a lot of adversity. You really do end up feeling for the protagonist in this, especially in a shot like this, where she goes into an abandoned theater and is just awestruck by the posters that are still there. It's clear that the people who have made this really do understand the struggle behind making art. I do believe that more episodes are in the works, at the very least I hope they are, because this is the only animation on the list that fell into the criteria that I laid out in the start. At the time of me writing this episode, the original video is only on the cusp of 8,000 views. It deserves to be so much more popular. I'd also be remiss if I didn't mention that one of the creators has made a pilot for another series called Song in the Sky, which is a much more serious attempt at storytelling. It follows a fighter pilot who is very clearly suffering from some form of post-traumatic stress disorder, trying to defend her home of a floating city from giant monsters. It's really crazy and it's really creative, and I'm also excited to see where that one goes as well. The team behind these projects seriously has me invested in whatever they choose to do. They have a lot of potential, and it seems like all they really need is an audience. And finding things like this is one of the reasons that I really do like doing Admirable animations, and especially this internet animation series. It's not really just about helping my viewers find some new cool thing to watch, although that is a really good benefit. It's about helping these under-the-radar series find some kind of audience. I know that it can be very disheartening to put a lot of time and effort into something and cast out into the world and just collect silence in return. Sometimes that hurts even more than being told what you've made is crap. I've been there before, and I prefer being told what I do is crap than not being told anything at all. My piece of advice to those that find themselves in that position is to keep trying. Don't give up. You have to hold hope that there is an audience out there. You may not find it in the way that you expect, and that audience may not be for even what you expect, but it can be found, unless you quit. If you quit, well, then you'll never get that audience, will you? You have to keep on creating. Now, there is one series that I mentioned a lot in the past that didn't get a mention here, and I think that you all might have guessed.